Hey, it's Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe Hikes. We're here at Springer Trailhead. If you look out, you might be able to see the frost on top of the trees because you got pretty frosty up here. The wind's blowing, pretty cold, but we're headed to Three Forks. Like I said, we're headed to Three Forks. Not a very long hike. It's very cold. A little surprised. It's kind of warm down at the house, but the wind chill up here got to be in the 20s. I mean, I've got on plenty of layers up top, but not on my legs. All right, we're gonna head straight. So this is a kind of interesting thing how they've brought the trail around. It used to be you went right over that rock, as I recall. I guess in a way that kind of dovetails into something I wanted to talk about this week, and that is leave no trace. Leave no trace. Boy, them are some sad rhododendrons. I saw some back there that were curled too. They'll curl lengthwise like a paper towel roll when it gets super cold. Right here, probably the last time I was here, I came across a couple of guys. There were two guys on that side and one guy where I am, and there was a rattlesnake between them. And he was raising sand. I managed to take my trekking poles out as far as I could and get him off the trail, but he was not happy. Yeah, too cold for him today, that's for sure. Well, got a couple of through hikers behind me. He says she's got some experience hiking, but he don't, so they skipped the approach trail and started at Springer instead, which is probably a good idea. I was giving them a little bit of recon about the next few miles. That'd give them some time to get used to the hiking part before they hit the mountains heavy, the climbs heavy, I should say. Leave no trace, of course, is a set of principles to sort of guide your thinking and your behavior when you're out in the woods, particularly when you're hiking and camping, that sort of thing. Key point to remember is leave no trace is a set of principles. They're not rules, they're not laws, they're principles. So what's the significance of LNT being a principle, a set of principles, as opposed to a set of laws or a set of rules? Well, rules imply structure, that there's something rigid about a rule, right? There's an implication, possible consequences involved with rules. Laws are a little stronger, right? There's serious consequences, criminal consequences. But principles, those are things we adopt to be better people or to behave better. Something to guide us that we can apply to our behavior to make sure that our behavior falls in line with those principles or with a specific outline of behavior. So had we taken a left at that last crossroads, we would have came here and continued on there, on the Bent Mackay. We're going to continue on the Appalachian Trail and follow our white blazes. A little bit windy. In the context of leave no trace, I'm going to tell you a story. A fella got on Facebook talking about how he had finished his through hike and had taken a memento from each state that he had hiked through. Picked up a stone and carried it with him. So he would have a stone from each state when he was done. Now, if you've been on Facebook forum or any other forum for that matter, you can probably imagine what happened. Somebody proceeded to tell this person He had violated leave no trace. He was a terrible person. What he had done was wrong, etc., etc. Got some hikers coming in front of us as we get to this little creek crossing. Beautiful. So anyway, so my question for you to ponder is, did that hiker do something wrong? Keep in mind, we don't know where the stones came from. Could have been at a road crossing. Who knows? We just don't know. We don't know. But ask yourself that question. Was he wrong? Did he do something wrong? Well, we come across some of that ground cover that's turned purple, so it got cold. We move along, making our way toward a Stover Creek shelter turnoff. Be getting there here shortly. Tell you another story. Little girl visited Great Smoky Mountains National Park. While playing down by a creek, she spotted a stone, small stone, and decided, I'm gonna take that home with me. That's a pretty little rock and I want it. So she put it in her pocket or pack or who knows what she did. Somehow she managed to get it home. Someone along the way explained to her that you should really leave stones in nature. They should stay where you find them. And she may have taken that out of a creek. In fact, I think the way the story went, she had taken it from the side of a creek, and they emphasized that that's very important to the creek ecosystem. So she decided she was going to write a letter to the park rangers and mail that with the accompanying stone back to them with an apology. And of course the story was, in the direction of, it was a great learning experience, and the park rangers were thankful that she did that, etc. So the same question I pose to you is, did she do something wrong? Now keep in mind, that's a national park. There may very well be a rule about that, and I would expect that there is. So in that sense, she's got a little added weight to what she did than her through hiker that I mentioned before. That being said, the park ranger didn't address it from the standpoint of rules at all. He more or less addressed it from the standpoint of leave no trace. So from that standpoint, let's think about it in those terms. From a leave no trace standpoint, did she do something wrong? Make our way along. These logs have been here a long time to have that much moss on them. Well, there's a shelter. And there's that unofficial side trail that takes you up there. The proper trail's around the corner here, though. If I took that side trail, I'd have to come right back here. I guess it's my OCD, I don't know, but if I was through hiking, I would want to do every single bit of the white blaze that I could possibly do. So, what about you? You one of those, I don't mind picking up the trail 100 yards up, or are you I gotta do every single blaze? I'm an every single blaze kind of guy, I think. Anyway, here's our turn off to the shelter there, Blue Blaze, and we're gonna make a hard left right here and continue on. All right. Hey, it's nice to put a little hardware cloth on here to keep you from slipping, which is nice. I think there used to be yeah, it's right there. It's like it's been cut and moved. That used to be just a single little thing to hike across there with, but it's like they got that all taken away. So we work our way across. Here we go. I don't know how slick some of that might be, so There we go. So getting back to our right and wrong. In the case of the little girl, she was in a national park, likely violated a rule. By extension, she at the very least was wrong in the sense that she broke a rule. In the case of our thru hiker, giving him somewhat the benefit of the doubt, let's just assume that he took a stone from the trail, not from a roadbed or something like that. And he did so all along the route. Did he do something wrong? Well, we don't know what principles he's adopted for himself. Did he adopt LNT principles? If he is someone who ascribes those principles to himself, if he's somebody who says, hey, I want to adopt these principles and live by them when I'm in the woods, then he violated the principle. And since he adopted those principles, he had violated his principles. And in that regard, he was wrong. Now, if he didn't know anything about LNT, maybe he read LNT and said, you know, I do the best I can, I'm not worried about it, didn't take those principles into himself, and he did nothing wrong. That's very important. And despite what somebody on Facebook, somebody on White Blaze, somebody on whatever wants to project to that man's actions, he didn't do anything wrong. He did something that would have been wrong had you done it if you adopted those principles. Gets a little hairy, doesn't it? Through the trees you can see a lone standing bark stripped tree. What a majestic thing that was at one time. Another one beside it. Pretty awesome. To me, that right-wrong question is salient, right? Because what we're finding is that people are really quick to jump on someone's case because they have violated a principle of mine. And that's what's happening when somebody starts a thread or starts a flame war over what somebody else has done. It's very important that we understand that when we take on a principle to live by and we behave contrary to that principle, that we have violated the principle. We have violated our conscience. We've behaved contrary to what we believe, right? But if somebody else behaves contrary to our principle, it's not in that person's best interest or the interest of the principle to chide them for it. Rather, what we should be doing is trying to teach them the principle. You can see the leaves blowing. The wind's coming up. I think it's coming up this draw. Yeah, you can see how it opens up here. So this is a creek draw. And the creek over here, you're hearing to our right, runs down this draw. So you got wind coming up. And just like that, it's a lot calmer than it was just a few seconds ago. So while you're pondering the right and wrong of picking up a stone, let's throw another little wrench in there. Did you know in the National Forest, it's perfectly legal to drive in with your pickup truck, load up your pickup truck full of rocks, take them home, decorate your yard with them. As long as you're not out here collecting rocks commercially and they're only for your own use, perfectly legal. Well, that throws a big old wrench in that whole LNT or else kind of mentality. Well, you could say, well, Uncle Joe, that's the authorities doing it. They've given you, the law's given you that authority. That doesn't mean that it's right for you to do it, because it still violates LNT. Okay, I get that. But if I bring my truck out to the woods and I gather those stones like so many people have, am I wrong? Gets back to the whole point of being right or wrong. And if it's wrong for you because you wouldn't do it, does that mean it's inherently wrong for somebody who did do it? The reason I bring all this up is because if you were to only go on forums, only go on Facebook, you're a new hiker, somebody new to the outdoors, you would get a fairly militant idea about what it's like outdoors, what your behavior should be like, how you should conduct yourself. And all you really want is to try to get out in nature, you know, de-stress, all of those good things. And so many people want you to adopt all of these rules and regulations right off the bat so that you don't do one single thing wrong in the woods. All right, made it to our little footbridge. I guess this is a Bigfoot bridge. The creek's making its way down. It'll come down and merge. That may be Chester Creek, I'm not sure. Or that may be actually Stover Creek. It's going to come down and merge with Chester Creek, I think. I could have this all wrong. Eventually, I think they all come down to Noontutla Creek. So this is where I'm going to lose some of you. And I've been advised this is not a topic that I should really talk about. But you can't talk about LNT without talking about it. Let's assume for a moment that I'm a decent person. It's a stretch, but play along. I round up my dollars at the grocery store, or actually more at the hardware store, McDonald's, places like that. I round it up for charity. And let's say I do all these wonderful things, theoretically making me a good person. For some people, this simple act makes me a bad person. All right. That is a cairn. Just 3 little rocks. Why is it a cairn? Because it's stacked. And now I've become a terrible person. There's our Benton Mackay turn off. There's our little, you can see our triangle and our triangle on the tree up yonder. All right, now we're hiking both the AT and the Benton Mackay. Well, we can just see the tops of some of the cars. And they're blocked now, but you can see the side of a car there. Sweet around the corner here. Yeah, lots of folks parked along the side there. This is one of the more beautiful spots, in my opinion, on the AT in Georgia. You got these huge hemlock trees. And the bridge is just beautiful. Yeah, gorgeous. Iconic shot looking up the creek there. Many pictures have been taken here. There's the creek flowing down. Yeah, hiked this with my son-in-law. My daughter's watching. She'll remember that this is where we came out and waited patiently, maybe a little impatiently, for her to come down the road. Rest is history. AT continues across there and goes out to Long Creek Falls. About a mile.
So let's go over these LNT principles. First one is plan ahead and prepare. The next one is travel and camp on durable surfaces. Dispose of waste properly. Leave what you find. Minimize campfire impacts. Respect wildlife. And be considerate of others. Now, when you start digging into these, some interesting things come to mind. Planning and preparing, know the regulations of where you're going to be prepared for weather conditions, schedule your trip when it's not high use times. Visit in small groups, split up larger groups, repackage your food. And interestingly, use a map and compass to eliminate the use of rock cairns, flagging, and marking paint. That's the only time that cairns are really mentioned in LNT. There is another principle that could certainly apply to cairns, but it's interesting because when you hike most trails, you see marking paint. And if you hike on a lot of rock slab, you see a lot of cairns. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, that's different because those were put there by people who make the trail, and they have the authority to do that. Okay? But if you start teaching people they need to tear down cairns, and I see a lot of people who, in their videos, they will kick over a cairn. You might have a novice out there who doesn't realize that the cairn that's on top of that slab is there for a purpose. Kicks it over, somebody gets lost. Not good. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. Camp at least 200 feet from lakes and streams. How many times have you set up camp next to a stream? According to LNT, that's wrong. Not wrong, but it should be avoided. It's interesting that nowhere does any of this say that's wrong. But yet, that's kind of how we treat it, isn't it? That's certainly how a lot of people treat it. Getting into disposing of waste properly. I think most of us understand this one. Bury your poop and do your dish cleaning and stuff and your dishwater 200 feet away from streams and so forth. I think we all understand that one. We probably all do that for the most part. Leave what you find. If you find arrowheads, take a picture, but don't take it with you, that sort of thing. Leave rocks and plants and other natural objects as you find them. This gets back to our earlier discussion. Do not build structures. You could argue that cairns would come into that sort of thing, but how many times do you see people put logs together, to make benches and that type of thing? Here's one I can assure you almost nobody is doing. Minimize campfire impacts. Okay, we all use established rings. I'm sure we probably all do that. Keep fires small. Use only sticks from the ground that can be broken by hand. Yeah, that's not happening. Burn all wood and coals to ash. Put out campfires completely, then scatter cool ashes. Not doing that either, are we? Starting to get a little feeling in the pit of your stomach about how, much you're really adhering to this stuff, right? Respect wildlife. I think we all do that. Don't leave food where wildlife can get it. Don't feed the animals. Be considerate of others. Don't make a lot of noise. Don't play your music loud. Be nice to people. Some of these things are easy to do. Some of these things are not easy to do. And my whole point of this is, if you're going to castigate people on cairns, if you're going to castigate them on some principles and not others, understand that if you're violating some of those principles too, and you think they're a bad person, what does that make you?
Some kind of plane in the distance, but every time I come by this section of trail, by the creek's probably 50, 80, 100 yards down, it always sounds like somebody's bass is playing in their car. Of course, I picked a time to talk about it when a plane's off in the distance, but it is an interesting thing as you walk along. So here's the log where I built that cairn. I took the stones from the trail, and I want to note that the creek is probably 50 yards that way. Now, hopefully I didn't lose too many of you on that whole Karen thing. But it's important, I think, to have this discussion because Karens have become very political. And like most political movements, they've got their own victim. And that victim is the hellbender salamander. The hellbender salamander is largely the catalyst for people using the phrase Karens are dangerous. Because when you disturb habitat in a creek where that salamander lives by lifting rocks, using them to build cairns, etc., you're disrupting or potentially disrupting the habitat of a hellbender salamander. The problem is that people will take that possibility and make it a near certainty, such that a cairn built here on the trail bed 50 yards from the stream is equated to the one that's built in the stream, such that coming across a single cairn is like coming across 100 cairns. And so they get in their mind that they're all dangerous, they're all bad, you should hate them all, and it just starts to stew in people. And I've seen people in trail videos before just get agitated, you know, and almost angry from that sort of thing. Even if the cairn they found is hundreds of yards from the nearest water, they will make a comment about how dangerous they are or how wrong they are. Now, I'm not here to say that they're good things. I'm not even here to say you should build one. That's not what I'm saying at all. My hands are really cold. The wind had kicked up as we were leaving back there. And of course, sitting for a while, taking a break, you tend to cool down a little bit because you're not moving to keep your body temperature up. But I'm starting to get a little warm now. Feeling a little better. Fingers aren't quite as cold as they were. So we make our way down this old, looks like old logging road bed that nature's encroached down to a little single track finally. So the hellbenders kind of become the club that people use to browbeat others on cairns. And while the salamander is certainly a concern, its numbers dwindling, etc., you have no way of knowing where one is, you know, if you made a cairn in a creek. But should you do it? No, you shouldn't do it. If nothing else, not in the creek, right? Doesn't mean you should do it anywhere else. Just saying, you should be considerate and be aware of what that might do. And I agree with that. Problem is, people will conflate, as I said, one cairn for 1,000. Or some of those cairns that you see, there was a story, I think it was in the Smokies, where these guys had built one out of a huge slab of rock. And of course, people are like, oh, you know, that could have destroyed habitat for the hellbender, and etc., and just people just get, you know, see that and they just get so worked up and have gotten worked up. And as I recall, the post that I saw was on Facebook, so it's probably inevitable people got worked up over it. But the Park Service, what was their reaction? Was it, we need to find these people, we're putting out an APB, you know, if you know anybody that did this, let us know, we need to find them? No. Their response was, we encourage people to avoid this sort of thing. That's a far cry different than what you read in the forums. In the forums, they would say, hey, this person's evil. I dare say some of them would find them and at the very least beat them senseless for what they've done. Just saying, big difference. Not to say it's any less a bad thing, but it's not any more a bad thing either. This is such a great section here with all these huge hemlocks and conifer type trees with all the pine needles on the ground. Oh, love hiking in this type of environment. Some of these trees are pretty big too. Mayflower right yonder. So I want you to ask yourself a question. You ever been on a group hike and you had to cross a creek? Maybe a creek that was deep enough that you had to get your feet wet. Maybe there's 10 of you. Maybe just 5 of you. Maybe there's 15 of you. All crossing the creek. You think that has a potential of disturbing hellbender salamander habitat? You bet your britches it does. Think about a storm. The rocks that you see tumbled down the stream or even embedded, they came from somewhere else. A single storm, a huge deluge in this type of environment where you have steep mountain slopes. Water gathers and moves at a tremendous pace and volume, turns all of those rocks over. No, that doesn't give somebody an excuse to build a cairn, but it does say that in the grand scheme of things, the cairn is only so dangerous to the environment. That's not to say it's zero. That's not to say that people should build them. It's just to say that there's a bigger picture. We need to avoid ideas and concepts of evil and good when we're discussing such things. That's my only point. Not saying you should be able to build a cairn or not be able to build one. That you should or should not do it. What I will say is, if you're getting so torqued over a single stack of rocks, maybe you're bringing too much to the trail with you. I guess my point is, when it comes to LNT, keep some perspective. No one is keeping all of those principles 100%. Some people may very well decide some of these principles are not something that I'm going to do 100%. Maybe you take them and say, in some circumstances, I may not apply that particular principle. I think in the grand scheme of things, if you're doing some, you're making a difference, you know? Maybe over time, you get better, right? Maybe over time you adopt more of them. And that's what matters. You know, for some people, cairns are more important than everything else, and I don't get it. I really don't. That doesn't mean I think it's okay to have 100 cairns in a creek, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to have some compassion for others when we see new hikers who take a picture and post it online and say, I saw this really cool cairn. Because unless you're scattering the ash of your campfire, or you're avoiding camping by a creek 100% of the time, you're as guilty as they are, right? Sounds like a highway running down there, don't it? Roaring. Long way down, though, to go find out what it is. Onward. All right, don't miss this turn. The problem with this turn is there's no mark for it other than that. The marking you can see down the trail there. Don't go that way. Ask me how I know. There's our shelter turn off. Here's the trail. Wind's really going good. Here's our crossing with the Bent Mackay. We'll get to one more just before the parking lot. I want to be honest with you. I'm not crazy about the term or the phrase leave no trace. I think that it has an absoluteness to it that the people who came up with it probably did not intend, so I'm not indicting them. But that concreteness, if you will, I think has given people what they believe to be license to castigate and browbeat people over those principles. And as we've already established, principles that they do not adhere to 100% themselves. I freely admit I don't. For instance, I don't necessarily build fires with small sticks. If there's a big log or something that I can burn, that I know is going to burn a long time, I'm probably going to use it. As long as I'm putting out my fires completely, I don't believe that I'm wrong or doing anything bad. But leave no trace would prefer that you make a smaller fire. Okay? So, are you wrong? Are you right? I don't think it's a question of being wrong and right. In the off-roading world, we have a movement called tread lightly. And I like that better because it understands, it kind of presupposes that you're going to make some kind of impact. And would leave no trace, it's the same. You wouldn't know it from the phrase, but you're not going to go through life not leaving a trace. You're not going to hike a trail without leaving a trace. So in some ways, maybe it's a poor name. But I encourage you to read those principles, because when you read them, at least I don't come away at all with the idea that I need to go on Facebook and tell people how bad they are, because there's something in there that they violated. And yet that's what we see. I'm past a few more hikers. I've seen a lot of through hikers on the trail and a lot of section hikers. Just passed a guy in a kilt. Oh, he had base layers on. Don't kid yourself. But big tall guy. He said he's gonna try, make it all the way. I hope they all make it. Of course, I've been handing out my traditional joke. When somebody asks you if you're through hiking, say, no, I got a long way to go. Well, here's our rock slab and our little steps there, closing the circle on our conversation about leave no trace. I guess at the end of the day, I want us to think about being more compassionate about leave no trace. None of us are doing it 100%. I'm not. There's some things about leave no trace that I think I can do differently and still be fine about. And that may be the same with you. I know some people think the cairn thing is more important than the campfire thing, or the not collecting rocks is more important than camping by a creek. You know, that's a decision you're making for yourself. And trying to make it for somebody else is just going to cause strife. And, you know, there's enough of that in the world as it is. Well, we're back at the trailhead. We can just see old Goby there. Hopefully nobody broke in and got my electronic quarterback. Might want to replay the Super Bowl with me as the MVP. Well, Springer to Three Forks used to be a bit of a tradition. Anyway, it's a good hike, 6.4 round trip. We'll see what the steps came up to, but right now let's get out of here and get down where it's warmer and find something to eat.